Hey there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to the Red Pill Religion podcast. Red Pill Religion, where amongst the things we say is that it is, in fact, okay to criticize any religious or non-religious group, ethnicity, or culture, especially its leadership and most prominent members. So if you like the kind of work we do here on Red Pill Religion, please support our work on redpillreligion.com. Remember, we face constant harassment. We've been deplatformed multiple times. We're on our third, maybe fourth YouTube channel, depending on how you count it. But we are continuing alive. We're found on other platforms like BitChute, and we're looking at finding our way onto others as well. But in the meantime, if we disappear, find us on redpillreligion.com. And yes, we would very much appreciate your patronage on things like Subscribestar, or the PayPal donations and Bitcoin donations are very much appreciated too. We're also live now on MeWe app, or I'm sorry, at WeGather app. We'll have more to say about that in the future, but we appreciate your support. Okay, so tonight I'm pleased to say that joining us we have Misha Popoff, who we've had at least one stream with before. In fact, I have linked it in the low bar, and it'll be on the redpillreligion.com website too after Oda gets it published for us. We had a great stream called Misha Popoff on Bible Salt oh my goodness, one more time, Bible Salt of the Earth as Saltpeter, which, by the way, was one of the most enlightening bits of conversation or exegesis I've had in quite some time. You really made me truly understand what salt of the earth is in a real rich way. So I thank you for that, Misha. How you doing tonight?
Hey, doing good. And yeah, that was a fun interview for sure.
I think everybody should check it out. And if you look into it, the basic answer is if anybody doesn't know, in the Bible, they refer to salt, but they refer to it in ways that seem contradictory until you realize that the biblical word for salt and saltpeter were the same exact word. So they just thought they had two different kinds of salt, and saltpeter is useful as fertilizer. I'll leave it at that. Go check out the interview if you want to. And in the meantime, the reason Misha's on, well, Misha has appeared in Culture Wars magazine. I should have probably linked that, but I'll mention that. It's culturewars.com, right? Yeah. A fascinating publication by E. Michael Jones. And then Misha wrote to me, and we started arguing about some of the things that Dr. Jones said, because, you know, I'm not 100% on board on everything E. Michael Jones says, but I think he needs to be heard, and he's right about an awful lot of things. I don't know that he's completely right about everything, but he makes very, very good points. I'd like to point out that we've had Dr. Jones on two times so far, and I pray one day to get him on again. I note with pride, we've got it linked here, our first interview with Dr. Jones, wherein I was actually more hesitant and more pushing back at him and more challenging him on some of his assertions. That somehow was seen fit by YouTube, as you will see here, to basically sandbox it and hide it. It was such a frightening interview, such a frightening conversation, apparently, that YouTube had to mark it as the following content has been identified by the YouTube community as inappropriate or offensive to some audiences. So you have to find that. It doesn't show up in searches. You can't comment on it or upvote it or downvote it or anything. It is sandboxed and hidden. But if you go to that link and just say, I understand and wish to proceed, you'll see an interesting interview where Michael and I go back and forth a bit. It was a very friendly interview. I enjoyed talking to him a lot. Oh, you might also want to see the one where we did on modern atheism. I noted his readers. Some of his readers complained that I talked too much, but all I got to say about that is, hey, we do a lot of important work here too, and you're welcome for the free beer. I think it was a great conversation where we both had a lot of good things to say. So check those out. Now, Misha, before we get going, because we had argued about this in email, and I want to save a lot of the energy, I want to make a few points to you and the audience before we get into any deeper debate, okay? Because I think I'm in a little less denial and a little more open-minded on this than a lot of people. I'm going to repeat what I opened the show with, which is that I say it is okay to criticize any religious or non-religious group, ethnicity, or culture, especially its leadership and most prominent members. I think that is fair. I think that's fair to say about what we call the Black community in the United States, or to say broadly about the English or the Russians or the Japanese or the Americans, or if you want to switch, I'm with E. Michael Jones. I don't really agree with white identity, but okay, you can criticize white people, I guess. It is okay to do this, and it's not okay for Jews to say we're above criticism. You can only say nice things about us. I'll make a few definite points, 4 of them, so we'll get this out of the way one way or the other. So I agree. Number 1, if it's okay to say good things about Jews, it's okay to say bad things about Jews. I will agree with this. 2, Jews do seem unable to coherently define themselves. I agree with this too. And by the way, I've had a number of friends in the Jewish community, especially the Orthodox Jewish community, going back decades, actually, at this point. And intelligent Jews helped convince me that there had to be a God. So I feel a real fondness for the Orthodox Jews. Still, it is true that the Jewish people appear to be unable to coherently define themselves, which means it's fair for other people to look at them and have their own definitions. And frankly, I find Dr. Jones's analysis that they are a negative identity to be hard to ignore. 3, I agree that Jewish identity appears to be inextricably tied to denial of Jesus. I think that it does. I've known too many Jews, religious and non, including Jews who never go to synagogue, who aren't really sure there's a God, or who are even atheists, who will tell you Jew for Jesus is a contradiction in terms. Completely non-religious Jews will say things like that. I've heard it countless times throughout my whole life. So there does seem to be a definite rejection component to the Jewish identity. And finally, I agree that understanding the Logos really matters. I am incredibly grateful to E. Michael Jones and actually Owen Benjamin and a few others for finally bringing this word back to the attention of Christians and others in the Western world, because we've forgotten it. And understanding the Logos is key to understanding the Christian religion, to understanding Western philosophy, to understanding Western civilization and Western culture. Hell, it's what's actually necessary to understand Western science in the long run. I'm so grateful to him for all these things. Now, so Misha, we're not going to argue about any of that, presumably. We're out the gate and we've got all that out. Fair enough?
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
All right. So one of my biggest disagreements is that I think that Dr. Jones, if he's listening, still love you, man. In fact, I wish you were my godfather. But in any case, I think he reduces everything to the Jews too much in terms of everything that's wrong in the world. I think there are religious and political groups who ain't got much to do with the Jews who are still very much of a problem. And there seems to be this tendency among, maybe I'm overstating it or overgrowing it, to suggest that really all the evil in the world appears to get ultimately back to the Jews. That is not what he said, but that just seems to be the logical endpoint of almost every conversation. It's the Jews' fault somehow. And that's setting me on edge a bit. So what are your thoughts on all that so far, Misha?
Well, for me, the big issue, since you raised Logos, and we agree that the Jews of all varieties really are defined by their rejection of Logos, the big issue for me, Max, is atheism. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not aware of any other religion or tradition or ethnicity that embraces atheism as much as the Jews. So you'll have, of course, non-practicing Jews, just like non-practicing Catholics or non-practicing Sikhs. But that's not what I'm referring to. I'm referring to actual atheist Jews, like the Bolsheviks. And in any other religion, if you decide you're an atheist, you're not in that religion anymore. And so this becomes a real historic engine, if you will, for revolution and evil, which I think is unprecedented. I mean, sure, yeah, the Jesuits are out there. They're spilling blood for Jesus, right? Thanks, yeah, Jesuits.
I'm a Catholic, and I know the Jesuits are a problem. By the way, anybody in the audience who thinks all Catholics don't criticize other Catholics, you're mistaken. There's real problems with the Jesuits, and a lot of Catholics think that the whole Jesuit order should be suppressed again, because the Jesuits are dangerous by the very nature of what they do. But in any case, I'm sorry, what, Misha?
I mean,
I'm sorry, Misha, you're breaking up.
Sorry?
You were breaking up, sir.
By their own admittance, I said. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, Jesuits, but the Jesuits, as evil as they are, they don't operate under the rubric of atheism. And so I don't know. They still have.
Okay, so now I'm going to defend the Jesuits a little bit more and say, yes, by their own admission, what they do is wrong. Just so anybody knows, why are the Jesuits so weird? Because the Jesuits can be a source of a lot of evil in the world. I'm saying it flat out as a Catholic. They can also be a source of a lot of good. They are not quite as Kabbalistic as people seem to think they are. It's just that the very definition of what a Jesuit does is he's supposed to explore new territories, either physical or intellectual, and explore other religions so that they can inform the Pope and protect the Church of spiritual and other developments in the world. This is why you find Jesuits doing completely innocuous things like astronomy, unless, of course, you're a flat earther and you think that's all a Jesuit conspiracy. The Jesuits run like the biggest network of observatories in the world. The Jesuits run a number of schools and provide a very fine education, and you don't have to go into a secret society and have blood rituals and all that. There's people running around calling themselves Jesuits who ain't never done anything wrong. Then again, there's people running around calling themselves Freemasons who've also never done anything wrong. That doesn't mean the Freemasons can't be dangerous. So I wanted to get all that out because I even get sick of being, as a Catholic, attacked for the Jesuits. But yeah, here's the thing. Let me go to two of them. Notice how in my slides where I said the points where we agreed, I said Jewish identity appears inextricably tied to denial of Jesus and understanding the Logos matters. Now, as a Christian, of course, I completely agree, although we should be willing to say that the Logos started as a philosophical concept, and somebody who's not convinced of the gospel tales can still get an intellectual understanding of the Logos, at least as worked out by the likes of Socrates and Plato. So, I mean, I have this idea that there are people in the world who in their hearts are seeking the Logos, know there's a Logos, but for whatever reason are confused and don't believe the Jesus story. It seems almost like a little dicey to say if you're Jewish, you automatically deny all logic, reason, and order in the universe. Because you were unconvinced of the gospel tales.
Yeah, that would be a step too far. But when it comes to rejecting the Logos, like I was saying, there's no other religion that has as a subset an atheist movement within. Like I say, if you're Sikh or Christian and you decide you're an atheist, well, then you're no longer Sikh or Christian. But and the evidence is right there with the Bolsheviks in Russia. If you decide you're a Jewish atheist, that's fine. Here's some money. Here's some gold and some guns. Go and kill some Christians. And that seems to me to be historically unique.
All right, I'll give you this. Again, I have a special fondness for Orthodox Jews that I've known for a number of reasons, but also other Jews. And there does seem to be very definitely, even within the non-Jewish character, non-religious Jewish population, just this automatic rejection of the idea of Jesus. I think, like I said, I mean, I've met all kinds of secular, non-religious Jews. You know, maybe they show up at temple a few times in their lives, or not at all. And they're still like Jew for Jesus, contradiction in terms. That's a really negative identity. And when you try to get a positive identification out of the Jews, to be honest, they can't give you one, or rather they'll give you 5 or 10 different answers, all of which are internally self-consistent, but don't match each other. So it's an ethnicity. I mean, the Jews themselves will say it's hard to define. Well, it does seem like defining themselves by the negative rejection of the Christian religion seems to be prevalent even among those who have nothing to do with Judaism. You know what else I'll give you? I am convinced, and I didn't seem able to convince Dr. Jones of this, I am convinced that the most dangerous religious view in the entire world is atheism. And I know that causes so many people to lose their minds and say I'm crazy, but I'm not. All you have to do is look at the numbers. Even Vox Day, a heretic himself, still an interesting guy, put together the numbers, man. And the Muslims, for example, are nowhere near as dangerous as God-denying atheists are when they get power. You just mentioned the Bolsheviks, which, by the way, was lousy with J people. It was lousy with Jewish names, tons of Jewish names. And if you look carefully at Marxism, it's not deniable. Denial of God is center to Marxism. Some will deny it and say it's just an economic philosophy, but they're lying. Denial of God is what comes first in Marxist philosophy, and everything else comes after that. And it does seem like an awful lot of Jews, when they leave the Jewish religion, when they leave Judaism especially, they don't rush to embrace Jesus. So they've just taken the negative part and even given up the idea that there's any God at all. And that seems to be when they turn particularly dangerous. They go right into some of the worst trades and get involved in some of the most horrible political movements that murder and rape all over the world. We agree with all this so far, right?
Yeah, totally. And it's the only one, to my knowledge. Like there's some good Sikhs and bad Sikhs, but if a Sikh becomes an atheist, then he's just a run-of-the-mill criminal or murderer or something. He's no longer a Sikh. I mean, the Sikhs don't want him, and he doesn't want the Sikhs anymore. I mean,
it would be like me claiming to be a Christian.
Sorry?
If I were to, it would be like me as a Christian saying, I'm an atheist now, and you have to accept me as a Christian.
Yeah, and that's unique to the Jewish faith, and that's why I actually call it the Jewish tradition, because if it's a faith, then you couldn't possibly be an atheist within it. But it is. I mean, the Bolsheviks are the textbook case. Trotsky, and some people say Lenin wasn't Jewish. Well, he was Jewish enough, plenty Jewish enough, and married a Jewish woman. But Trotsky's the perfect example of a radical, mass murdering atheist Jew. And he was born and raised a Jew, and he died a Jew. I don't know how many times he went to synagogue after he became an atheist. Probably never. But he was. I mean, who would deny that Trotsky was a Jew? Okay,
but I'm going to get to in a minute. There's two things to address with that, and I'll start with one, and then I'll try and get to the other. The first objection that comes to mind when I hear that is, wait a minute now, an awful lot of Marxists of Jewish heritage also fiercely reject their Jewish identity. They don't hide it. They get angry because they don't want anything to do with it. And they think they're getting away with it, getting away from it. I mean, now, not all of them, but the ones who really embrace hardcore Marxism, they tend to become enraged when you identify their Jewishness. And they seem to become enraged because they want it to be irrelevant and they want nothing to do with it. And they'll give long, David Horowitz and others have talked about this. They hate the Jewish religion, and they hate the Jewish identity, and so there's the first part I'm having trouble with this. What would you say to that?
I guess we'd have to go case by case on that. See, I mean, yeah, Trotsky, being an atheist and a Bolshevik revolutionary, he disavowed all of the stages of Judaism, and he did. Like, I agree, he probably didn't go to synagogue, and he changed his name too. And I'm sorry, I don't have his original Jewish name in front of me.
Lenin, right?
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, did you say so did Lenin?
Yeah, so did Lenin. He wasn't born Lenin.
Yeah, and Joseph Stalin, who wasn't even Jewish, but he changed his name probably just for political reasons. Although Stalin, we should talk about him. That'll be interesting.
We should, yeah, I want to get to him. But I mean, there is this. I mean, one of the books that I read, I don't know if I'll bother bringing it up on the screen, David Horowitz's Radical Son. Now, obviously, he came up among ethnic communist Jews in New York in the 30s and 40s, and oh shoot, I just forgot the point I was about to make about that. Oh, just that. For example, in his books, he was a communist radical in the 60s, hanging around with his other fellow commie radicals who were in places like universities and stuff already, and saying, haven't we all noticed that most of us are Jewish? And
yeah.
Everybody got pissed off at him, and that was sort of the end of things. That's in the book Radical Son by David Horowitz. I'll find it. I mean, they were pissed that he even brought it up. So there is a little bit of nebulosity on there. But on the other hand, the psychology of it seems to be, I've rejected the Jewish religion, and I've gone ahead and rejected God, the Jewish people, and everything else, and I'm going to remake the world in my ideal that I think is ideal. That seems to be what's in the communist Jewish mindset. And I say that having read a lot of communists of Jewish backgrounds, like Horowitz and Ron Radish. He's mad at me now, but Sygart, quite a few others I've known. But this leads to the second thing. I'm actually saying the denial of God wholesale is the more dangerous position, because you just brought up a name of a man raised Orthodox Christian. He was even a seminarian, and that was Joseph Stalin. Yeah. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying Stalin was a Christian, because that would be a lie, because Stalin renounced Christianity and became a fierce militant atheist and a persecutor of Christians. In fact, he murdered between 10 and 11 million Christians because they were Christians for that reason. It was at least as big a deal as the Holocaust that we never talk about. But he wasn't a Jew. And now I'm going to mention an even bigger mass murderer, probably the biggest mass murderer who ever lived in all of history, which is Mao Zedong, who was distinctly Chinese looking and did not look too Jewish to me. No, but got names like Pol Pot, and I would add the name Rockefeller as among who were at one time the darlings of WASP's, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant identity here in the United States. They were involved in all kinds of evil stuff. And I haven't even gotten into some of the weirder stuff that I believe in, but I don't know that we need to. But I mean, I believe there's actual stuff going on at places like the Bohemian Grove, and that's not a joke. And there are people into occult religions who are quite powerful in Washington, D.C. and such, who ain't got a drop of Jewish blood. I can give a few examples, like Sally Quinn, or who is that, Marina Abramovich, the Podestas. Seem to be a lot of Italians on the evil side too. And by the way, I love my Italian friends. The evil of God denial or actually declaring war on God doesn't seem like it just goes to the Jews to me.
Well, here, now you mentioned Mao, and then we got to go back to Stalin.
You know what? We'll go. I just threw a lot at you.
Yeah. So you mentioned Mao, and we got to get back to Stalin, but Mao was put in power by Jews. I mean, certainly he's not.
Come on, really? I'll believe you, but tell me.
They were there right through. They were right there on the, whatever you call it in China, the Politburo, and they sat there. They worked there. They guided.
There were Jews in the Chinese Politburo.
Oh, sorry.
There were Jews in the Chinese Politburo. Mao was being funded and supported by Jews.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what kind of revolution you're talking about. It takes money. You need money. I mean, we should also mention Adolf Hitler. I mean, he was backed by New York money. Let me mention, by the way, despite all the lies, Hitler at some point declared himself an enemy of the Christian religion. For all the crap you hear on the internet, which is mostly misinformation. Early on, he claimed he was a Christian. Once he was in power, he started persecuting Christians, and he murdered millions of them. That's not something they tell you in those horrible atheist forums, but that's actually true. Your Marxist professors won't tell you that either, but it's true. He murdered millions of Christians because he hated them and didn't want to be one. And he went back and forth from declaring himself an atheist to being some kind of pagan occultist. But he definitely hated Christians and Jews and the Jewish religion and all religions. And, well, he was a madman. But so you just said he was funded by New York financiers. You mean the Jews funded their own bad guy? I mean, what are you trying to say there? Yeah, totally. I mean, the Nazis and the Jews had an agreement. It lasted almost a decade. It's called the Transfer Agreement, also known as the Havara Agreement. And this as soon as Hitler came to power in 1933, this agreement was in place. And that's why the Jews backed him to get him into power. And it was to get Jews to move down to Palestine. And they moved quite a few down. And you might know, of course, George Soros, when he was 14, his job, he's Jewish, of course, but he was working to round up the property of Jews. And so people think, now people misunderstand that. They think, oh, George Soros, he was collaborating with the Nazis. No. The Jews were collaborating with the Nazis, and they successfully moved 70,000 Jews down to Palestine. Now, the problem was a lot of them wouldn't stay. But the way it worked is they would sell their property in Germany, and then 70% of their money would be transferred down to Palestine and be there waiting for them through a British bank. And that's what George Soros was involved in. And his involvement shouldn't surprise anyone, because this was done with not just complicity, but with the total backing and cooperation of Jewish financiers who wanted to get Jews down to Palestine. And
this is all before World War II and all before the Holocaust and all that.
Yeah, this is like years before, and it was going quite well. And of course, in exchange for this, part of the transfer agreement was that the Jews would lift their boycott on German goods, which was effective anywhere where the Jews had influence, like especially in America. So goods weren't getting into America. At 1931, 32. Well, don't worry. In 1933, German goods started flowing into America again, because the Jews said, "Okay, we got our guy in." So, what does Hitler, Lenin, Trotsky, Stalin, and Mao? What do they all have in common? They're all backed by Jewish money. Now, I want to throw something in at this point, Max. Before you do that, the first victim of the atheist Jews, the first victim of the Jews is the Jews, because no one suffered more in Germany in the lead up to the Second World War and during the war. No one suffered more than the Jews. I'll just say flat out, I don't believe the figure of 6 million. And as you already said, Stalin and Mao killed way more people than Hitler ever did. But in any case, yeah, the first victim, it's just like with feminism. The first victim of feminism is women who want to have a normal life and have a family. The first victim of Black Lives Matter is black who want to have a career and don't want to, go to protest rallies every weekend. And yeah, same with the Zionist Jews who were trying to take over the area known as Palestine. They've been trying for decades. The first victim of those Zionist, mostly atheist Jews was Jews, the rank and file Jews in Europe.
No, I will give you this. For example, while we hear a lot about the Holocaust, oh man, I just left that hang up. I don't want to. This could be a whole show. You question the 6 million figure on the Holocaust. I assume you don't question the Jews were severely persecuted and quite a few of them were killed, right?
Oh yeah, hundreds of thousands. Like probably the figure is maybe half that. Maybe it was 3 million. But the point is they were victims. See, even after the transfer agreement went south, even after it quit working and Hitler sort of turned on the Jews, it was still working well for the Zionists, because the message being sent to European Jews anywhere in Europe was, get the hell out of Europe and move down to what's going to become
Holy Land. Yeah, don't move down there. That's a part of the history. I've never heard that. I'd like to shoot us a reference or two on that, but I'm prepared to believe it because I know some of the other. I studied Germany and other genocidal regimes quite extensively, actually. And yeah, one of the dirty secrets about the Holocaust is that Hollywood's movies on the Holocaust don't get into this stuff very much. And there were Jewish collaborators from day one, and even on Jewish sites still. I forget what the word they had for them, but I mean, there were Jews helping round up other Jews to go into concentration camps. Yeah, Max, there were Jews helping kill other Jews.
Max, they were called Sonderkommandos. And they were there there were no gas chambers, by the way, but they were right there executing and picking out the good Jews to flight them out of the work camps and send them down to Palestine. So even after the deal went south, they were still getting Jews out of Germany under the watchful eye of the Nazis. And probably money.
Okay, and another part of the history, and I will mention this because the atheist Zionist Jews were particularly vicious towards the religious, observant, pious Jews. That was another part of the story. The one, the rabbis and the ones who were actually, wearing the yarmulke, the kippah, and all that. The Zionist Jews, especially in German days, Nazi days, would pick on them first and would go after them first. And I even know that in Israel now, to this day, the Zionists who control much of that country, generally have an attitude of anywhere between vague, condescending tolerance and outright contempt for the religious Jews. And I think that's rooted in the God denial, because say what you will about the Jewish religion, they at least think there is a God. You know, they're at least in the same boat as the Muslims, the Sikhs, and a few others on that one. And it does seem to me like the Jews who deny God are the ones who go crazy bad. But I mean, the perception I've had is, yeah, that also appears to be true of Germans who go atheist. It appears to be true of Chinese who go atheist. It appears to be true of Russians who go atheist. It appears that going atheist is what makes you most likely to become a genocidal maniac, and embracing that lifestyle, that philosophy. They'll sit there, by the way, I can already hear them screaming, it's just like a belief, it's not an ideology. Shut up. No, I'm sorry. You deny there's a God when there obviously is one. At least in the philosophical sense, there has to be one. That's going to have ramifications, and denying that reality will make you deny all kinds of things, like up to and including that you've done anything wrong. So you just start killing people instead of owning your own mistakes. And Vox Day showed this in some of his numbers. I'll find it. I mean, it's like literally if you put all religious wars put together, including everything the Muslims have done, everything the Christians have done, and everything every other religion has done, what atheists have done when they've gotten in power, what secular regimes have done when they've gotten in power, has been bloodshed, 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 and repression, repression, repression. It's what's happening in Europe right now. We were told for about 10 years, thanks to frauds like Steven Pinker and others, that secular regimes are less violent and more tolerant and more peaceful and they're not. Europe's going through hell now because of its secular audience, because of its secular orientation, and the secular ideology of globalism that drives it. But I'm not seeing Jews driving the whole EU experiment. Maybe you are.
Well, yeah, I don't know too much about the EU, but I'll say this: if you just atheists,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, an atheist is really a harmless, ignorant person, unless they have money behind them. And that's what Lenin, Trotsky, Hitler, Stalin, and Mao all have in common. They had money behind them. I mean, going to Mao, the last of those examples, Mao, we think, oh, yeah, the People's Revolution, you know, is the People's Republic of China and all this garbage.
Right.
And Mao more so probably than Lenin, who took a lot of gold and weapons to Moscow to take over the revolution that was already happening. But Mao more so, I think, than Lenin or Hitler. Mao had backing. There was no way to take over. The Chinese government at the time was quite powerful, and of course had backing from America and Britain. So, I mean, it was not a grassroots movement. It was not a people's uprising. It's the same for the Cuban Revolution, any revolution. We're always told, oh, the people are oppressed and they're rising up. Yeah. Well, maybe that's part of it. But if you don't have millions of dollars and if you haven't cornered the market on weapons, which means you have lots of weapons, which cost lots of money, but you're also going to stop the other guys from having weapons, it ain't going to fly. So in all those cases, it was the bankers that really made those revolutions happen. And can I just throw in quickly, you wanted a citation for the Havara Agreement, also called the Transfer Agreement. There's a book by a Jewish guy. And his I was just looking it up before it was my turn to talk. And his last name is Black. That's all you got to remember, Black. And he wrote a great book called IBM and the Nazi Holocaust. That's how you can narrow it down to find him. That's just one of his books, IBM and the Nazi Holocaust. His other book is on the Transfer Agreement. It might even be titled The Transfer Agreement. So he's a Jewish guy. He's not a self-hating Jew. He's still a Jew. His mother, apparently, if you listen to his interviews, his mother hates him for writing that second book actually it was his first book about the Transfer Agreement. And basically, Max, I could sum up Black, but probably not his real name, by the way. Black's position on a transfer agreement is this: there should be a statue of Adolf Hitler in Tel Aviv. Those are his exact words.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, his second book. Yeah.
Nazi Nexus, America's Corporate Connections to Hitler's Holocaust by Edwin Black, and, like you said, IBM and the Holocaust, the strategic alliance between Nazi Germany and America's most powerful corporation. Americans had a lot of friendly ties with the Germans until the war started.
The Bush family in particular.
Yeah, they really did. So did quite a few prominent figures. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's still another book, just so you and your listeners know. Those two books are that's him. It's Edwin Black. But yeah, and I forget, it's his first book. I think he wrote it in 89 or 90. In any case, yeah, it just blows the lid off all of this.
Oh, I think I have in fact found the book, so I'll try and put a link. It's The Transfer Agreement. This must be the book. The Dramatic Story of the Pact Between the Third Reich and Jewish Palestine, 25th Anniversary Edition. So basically what you're telling me is that wealthy atheists, Zionist banker-type Jews, actually were happy to collaborate with the Nazis and didn't particularly care if little everyday ordinary Jews got killed.
No, those were the first victims. Look, to this day, you know, there was that synagogue shooting. And of course, it wasn't a Jew who went in there and shot his fellow Jews, but the Zionists who are clamping down on free speech, the Zionists who are making it difficult for you, Max, to have a channel on YouTube, they're the ones causing the strife in society right now. And yeah, as Dr. E. Michael Jones explains, this gives rise occasionally to a lunatic with a gun. So it's not a direct connection. But let me put it this way. I don't think any Zionist Jews in New York or in Israel care one bit when some lunatic gunman goes into a synagogue and shoots people. They just don't care.
I'll tell you that. I'll tell you this much, and it really hurts me especially because I just had Jewish friends my whole life, even when I was an atheist. You know, make of that what you will, but I mean, literally smart Jews talked me into thinking there had to be a God. I'll never stop mentioning that because it was important for me. But it's like I used to call myself a Zionist. Then I stopped because I realized that's an ideology I don't want to do. But I always was kind of pro-Israel, as a lot of Americans are. And, you know, my view towards Israel has gotten more and more negative over time. And I recently got a week suspension on Facebook for making an observation. And it really, like, that suspension, it was a week suspension just for saying this. And what I said was, I think wealthy Zionist Jews will not hesitate to kill their fellow Jews or Christians. That's what I said. And that got me a week off of Facebook.
Yeah.
In other words, what we just said. And what I know to be true, Zionist Jews will mistreat and even kill or allow to be killed their fellow Jews, especially if they're religious. That is part of the history. And just saying that out loud got me a suspension. That tells me that there's something to the idea that Zionist interests are a lot more powerful than we like to say. But I would just say, you know, I got friends who are Jews who are not Zionists, who are critical of Zionists, or think Zionism is too extreme. There's Jews who want the entire state of Israel dismantled because they hate the Zionist enterprise so much. So it's worth mentioning all that.
And because they've read their Bible too, Max. The religious Jews understand there is not supposed to be a state of Israel. That will not help hasten the Messiah, the Messiah's arrival. I almost said the Messiah's return, but of course Jews don't believe the Messiah was here yet, so they think the Messiah is going to be coming for the first time. But the Torah is crystal clear. Anyone in Jerusalem is going to be wiped out when the Messiah either comes for the first time or returns. So yeah, absolutely. Our best ally as proponents of free speech and as proponents of logos is the religious Jews, the real religious Jews, not the opportunists. And so there's another name I want to quickly throw out, and it's Rabbi Yisrael Dovid Weiss. His name's not David, it's Dovid, D-O-V-I-D. So if you look him up, Dovid Weiss, he's in New York, and he says, for instance, the Star of David is an abomination. He says you won't see a Star of David anywhere in his neighborhood. strictly religious Jewish neighborhood in New York. I think it's in Newtown. I could be wrong on the name of the suburb that he's in, but he says, yeah, there's not a single Star of David in this neighborhood. That thing is an abomination. It's what Jesus referred to as the Star of Remfrang. And he said, Jesus said too, it's basically
I don't normally link Wikipedia because it's a trash site that I've been an editor on for 15 years, but it's a trash site. But it seems safe to link it on something like this. Here he is, Israel, David Weiss. I see who you're talking about. So he's extreme. He doesn't even like the Star of David. I've never known where that Star of David came from. You say Jesus referred to it as what?
Jesus refers to it as the Star of Remfram. Remphram, I believe. Remfram.
Oh.
That's in the King James. It might be different in different Bibles.
Oh, okay. Okay. Where does he do that?
But anyway, yeah,
where he does that for us? We can just look it up.
Oh, yeah, Rempham.
Where in the Bible? I mean, what chapter or verse do you recall? If not, we'll find it another time.
Acts.
Huh?
It's in Acts.
In Acts. All right, we'll find out where that is after the show. That's an interesting idea. I certainly, I never quite understood what that star was all about. There's Jews who don't like it. You're saying this rabbi here is an example of it. Doesn't even want to touch that Star of David because it's seen as a Zionist symbol, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a political symbol, and if you believe in God, I mean, yeah, we need kings. That's what's mentioned in the Bible, but you're not supposed to get involved in the nitty-gritty bribery world of politics. That's dirty stuff, and that's exactly what's going on, unfortunately, with the state of Israel. So yeah, most believing Jews, as you said, the ones who would help someone like you lift himself out of atheism, those Jews generally do not support the state of Israel. Now, when it comes to those devout Jews living in Israel, they have to do mandatory military service. And there's all sorts of problems with that. They'll do their service, but they'll refuse to carry a gun. They'll refuse to go on a march. They wrap that leather strap around their arm. That's part of their belief in some of those sects. And yeah, come back to what you said earlier. They are hated by the atheist politicians like Benjamin Netanyahu. He hates those believing theistic Jews more than he hates the Palestinians.
And he likes to suck up to American Christian fundamentalists too. That's a whole other subject. I don't know if I want to get into, but I do want to finish the focus on this issue because it really does matter. I'll give him a shout out here. We've had him on any number of times. Rabbi Yehoshaphat Oliver. I'm not saying it right. Yehoshaphat Oliver. Rabbi Oliver, we call him. I call him Reba just because I like him. He's one of those Jews who's like very critical of the Israeli government and thinks they're doing wrong and mentions all the bad things they do to Jewish citizen there. Yet he's one of those, and he'll even tell you straight up, it's absurd to think you can rebuild the temple, which some Christians have involved themselves in, and a few crazy Zionists, I think, of rebuilding the temple, whereas all the smart Orthodox Jews I've known have said, you can't do that. Only the Messiah can do that. The Messiah has to show up first, then he can rebuild the temple. But it appears that there are Zionists and other interests who are like, I think atheist Zionists actually give money to American fundamentalists. Just so that they will support Israel. I think that's been going on. Actually, I think that's been going on for about 150 years, based on my read of it. I don't know. Do you know much about that connection?
Well, there's definitely joined at the hip the Southern Evangelical movement, and then all the politicians, including the governor of my great state here. Sorry, I forget his name. The poor guy in the wheelchair, but
your state.
Yeah, of Texas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry, his name escapes me. But the Southern Evangelical movement is 100% Zionist. They wave the Star of Rempham, the Star of David. They wave that at their rallies, whether it's John Hagee or any of these stalwarts of the Southern Evangelical movement. So all of the religious leaders down here, and then all the politicians that stem therefrom, basically mostly Republicans, but a lot of Democrats too. They totally have undying support for Israel. And now look what Marco Rubio is doing over in Florida. Sorry, he's not the governor. I forget the governor's name in Florida, but he's a Republican. Joined in unison with Marco Rubio, the senator up in Washington from Florida. And they're trying to pass a law now that you can't boycott Israel. And that's happening actually in a lot of states. I'm just picking that one out as an example. And that law did pass here in Texas. You couldn't get a job as a teacher, for instance, if you didn't agree to not boycott Israel in any way. You had to agree, in other words, not to join in the BDS movement. Well, that was challenged here in Texas, and the law was struck down. But they'll just try it again, and the law still stands in many states. So yeah, that link, you're absolutely right. The Zionists are the ones buying the private jets for the televangelists, and yeah.
We might want to do a whole show on this, or I'll ask Dr. Jones if he wants to do it sometime. I really, I'm divided on it, but for the most part, I really have seen the Catholic Church is guilty of some of this too, but way more so, American evangelicals appear to have been going back at least to the Pat Robertson days, and there's evidence that this goes back even to the Schofield Reference Bible and the millennialist cults of the 19th century in America. Zionist Jews almost never, sometimes, but usually never, rarely are they religious. Zionist Jews they appear to be like the first ethnic nationalists. They really do to me. They appear to have been the first ethnic nationalists before the Italians, before the Germans. It appears that the Zionists, because they wanted to rebuild Zion and the Jewish people, but they also want to shuck their Jewish religion. And so you have these people sucking up to these really not religious people at all, Jewish people, sucking up to the likes of Pat Robertson and Tim LaHaye and Jerry Jenkins and so many Southern evangelicals. And they'll bring them over to the Holy Land. They'll bring them over to Palestine. They'll bring them to take them to sites and stuff like this. But what I notice is these American evangelicals who do this, who spend all this time in Israel too, will spend almost no time or discussion or anything about the Coptic Christians, the Eastern Orthodox Christians, and the Catholic Christians in that part of the world. It's like they don't exist, even though they've been living there for 2,000 years. That's one of the things I notice about evangelicals who are totally into Israel. They will say almost nothing about the Christians who actually live there. And they say nothing about the mistreatment of Christians by the Zionist regime there, even though that's happened many times. And it makes me very angry, and it makes me think wealthy Zionist atheists from Israel know what they're doing, know that the theology that they're peddling to these American evangelicals is false, because they're using them. They're using them for their own political moves. They don't believe this Left Behind garbage, and it is garbage, by the way. They don't believe in the rapture garbage, which, by the way, is garbage. They don't even particularly believe we're in the end times, and they wouldn't care if we were. They'd be on the other side anyway. Literally, it appears that American Christians, especially of the evangelical variety, have just, I hate to put it, but it looks like they've been conned by wily Zionists who use them, because the modern state of Israel, you even ask serious rabbis and stuff, they'll say that state of Israel does not match the borders of the Holy Land of the Promised Land as we're supposed to have it. That government type does not match the government type. You can't rebuild the temple unless the Messiah comes, and the Messiah won't come unless the Jewish people earn it. That's what they think. The Zionist Jews hate all that and seem to want to do everything Israel first, and yes, the Jewish people first. The Jewish people minus God, because they hate God. That's my kind of analysis of what's going on. Do I sound crazy?
No, you're absolutely right. And remember, the Ashkenazi Jews, now that we have DNA analysis, 23andMe, we now know the Ashkenazi Jews aren't even Semitic. They're not from that area. And they're generally the Zionists. The Ashkenazi Jews, like Netanyahu, are generally the Zionists. let's call them atheists. And who's the first victim? Well, other Jews. So now the Sephardic Jews, who are Semitic, who do have roots in Palestine, the Holy Land, you might have heard that they were victims back in the 50s. It's called the ringworm scandal. And what they would do is they were rounding up Sephardic children, and Sephardic Jews are a little darker. They're olive skin.
And they speak a Spanish language, a Spanish-based language, Ladino, I think it's called.
A lot of them came to Israel from Spain and Portugal. And there they were in the 50s, thinking they were helping build the Holy Land, which you and I agree is misguided. But there they were in good faith. And the Ashkenazi would round them up and say, oh, these Sephardic children all have ringworm. And so they would dose them with radiation. And yeah, just Google the ringworm scandal in Israel. They killed thousands of them. And many of them, some went sterile, some had cancer. But they killed thousands of their own because they wanted a genetically pure race that looked, white European.
Here it is on Wikipedia. I use it because we've already gotten one bogus copyright strike, and we already know Wikipedia is safe at least to show on screen. There is the ringworm affair. I'm going to have to read about this, but it already sounds like the Tuskegee experiments and the experiments the American government did to inject black people with syphilis and crap like that, right? Same idea. By the way, anybody who thinks modern governments or whatever don't still do things like this is crazy. It would not surprise me at all if a bunch of Zionists intentionally practiced eugenics to kill Jews they considered inferior. Because in my experience, while of course the everyday guy walking around calling himself, yeah, I'm a giant, Sid, my old buddy Sid, who was my roommate years ago, said, yeah, I'm a Zionist. Yeah, he's an American used car salesman. He's not, he got nothing to do with this. But yeah, the Zionist ideology, the more I look at it, A, it's an atheist ideology, it's a secular ideology. B, it does really appear to be the first ethnic nationalist secular movement. And that has ramifications even for the believing Jews. At the same time, how does that wrap around? We're admitting here, and I'm glad to hear it admitted, that Zionist Jews will inhesitantly torture, murder, and kill religious Jews. It's been an ongoing pattern for the last 150, 200 years, as far as I can tell. Ethnic identifying, anti-religious atheist Jews will not hesitate to kill their fellow Jews if they're believers. But it does back to what we said at the beginning. There does seem to be something in Jewish identity, even among the pious, like the very first thing in Jewish identity appears to be denying Jesus. And it does seem to be fundamentally, almost by definition, right? Because even if they'd say, no, that's not the core of our religion, well, but they lived in Christian lands for 2,000 years. And that denial of Jesus, that negative identity is really hard to deny. It is there. And as Dr. Jones has said a few times, it's a question every Jew eventually, no matter where he was born or where he was raised, eventually has to ask himself. And if you start by denying the very possibility of the resurrection of Christ, despite all the evidence for it, or the very possibility that he existed, you start denying all kinds of other things too, don't you? It just becomes central to your identity to deny or push away something rather than embrace something. I guess I'm associating, but this is how I see it. Nevertheless, I will say this, and we should wrap it up. And so I'll have a final thought, and then I'll give you a final word. Sure. I think the number one thing that concerns me, and I admit it, I enjoy listening to Dr. Jones. I enjoy listening to Owen Benjamin and others, and it is kind of invigorating to just hear somebody giving the Jews grief, because everybody else gets to get grief, but the Jews don't. There seems to be this, we can give grief to black people, we can give grief to white men, we can give white males. Christian straight white males are the most hated group in America. It's fun, and it is rather interesting. Once you start looking, you do notice that there seems to be a strong, let's put it to you this way, a strong group preference identity for their fellow Jews among the wealthy and powerful Jews. But I also do think, I can't emphasize enough, the wealthy, powerful, dangerous Jews, especially the Zionists, the secular ideologues of any stripe, really, whether they're Zionist or Marxist, they're the most murderous. And the most pious Jews are usually the first to go under the bus.
Yeah.
So I've really observed that, and I think it's crucial. And I really do think we should talk more sometime about completely, like I have no idea why I'm supposed to think that people with names like Podesta and Abramovic are ultimately the responsibility of the Jews. But I'll let you have the last word, and we'll kind of close it from here and maybe come back for more conversation about it.
Well, sure. Yeah, and I could, yeah, you're absolutely right about the Podestas and the Clintons. I mean, those people, they probably have a lot of Jewish money behind them. Obviously, George Soros would be the culprit there. But yeah,
He's a projector of Judaism and God, but yeah.
But no, but here's a quick story to end off with. Let's go back to Stalin. Stalin, out of Trotsky and Lenin, Stalin, we agree, definitely not Jewish, although he married, I think it was his second wife was Jewish. In any case, he did the bidding. He did the bidding of the Jews. And remember, they wanted to turn the Soviet Union into, heaven on earth, economically anyway. Now, what happened, a lot of people don't know. People wonder, how did we get dragged into Afghanistan? Well, here, really quickly, is what happened. Stalin came into power, took over from Lenin after he was a failed assassination attempt. And Stalin rules with an iron fist. World War II really plays into his hand. Remember, the death toll for Russia is 26 million. And there's no way Hitler killed all 26 million people. A lot of them, Stalin killed them. It was a good excuse. There's a war on. He can go in and wipe out anyone he wants. So he used the ruthless Bolshevik Jews. He used them right up until the 1950s. And here's one other thing you want to look up. It was in the early 1950s. I think around Stalin was still alive, so be in the early 1950s. He turned on those Bolshevik Jews. And people wonder why today Vladimir Putin apparently has Stalin's portrait hanging somewhere in whatever political building where they hang the pictures of the rulers. And this is the reason why. It was in the 1950s. Stalin, I don't know, he came to his senses, or maybe he was just using the Jews and they thought they were using him, but he turned on them. He threw a number of them in jail and had a number of them executed. And that began the repression of Jews that we never really heard about all through the 1950s. Now, Stalin died, but the people who took over, basically what happened in Russia, Max, was the Politburo became less and less controlled by Jews and more controlled by Russians. Unfortunately, they were now dyed-in-the-wool atheist Marxist Russians, not a Christian in the bunch. But Stalin started this process of de-Judaizing the Soviet Union, and it was brutal. Like I said, he executed.
Well, it was very brutal, and a lot of them wound up being able to flee to Israel. So, but
yeah. That jumps us forward. So a lot of them fled, but it was in the 1970s, finally, the Soviets let them. They let them go. So yeah, a lot of them escaped. If they had the wherewithal, they escaped, even before Stalin started murdering them. But yes, a lot of them in the 1970s, they were officially allowed to leave. And we in the West were told, oh, look at this, these poor Jews who were oppressed by the evil atheist Soviets. No. The Jews, these were the Jews who caused the Russians to become atheists. They just got their comeuppance. And I'm sure there was a lot of innocent Russian Jews who were swept up in this, but one way or another, that's the way it played out. But we were told in the 1970s that when these poor downtrodden Jews, a lot of them had spent years in jail by that point, they were allowed to leave and go to Israel. And we were told, oh, this is a great thing. They're finally free to practice their religion. Well, here's what they did, Max. They got to Israel and they right away started cooking up a way to get even with the Soviets. And the way they got even was under Jimmy Carter and Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter. They started getting us involved in backing the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. That was the only hot war going on at the time where we could really have an effect. And the Jews used their influence in Washington. That whole movie about what's his name, the Democrat who got funding for the Mujahideen.
Charlie Wilson's War.
Yeah, that's it.
Wilson, Congressman Charlie Wilson. I love that movie, but I always suspected I was being propagandized just a little.
Yeah, they left out the behind the scenes, which was, you know, same as what got us into both Iraq wars. It was Jewish influence in Washington. But that was the first stab of these exiled Jews who survived the purges by Stalin. That was the first chance they had in the 1970s to get even with the Soviets, and it has never ended. We've been in Afghanistan one way or another ever since. Now, we were only sending arms in at first, you know, arming the Mujahideen, and then we're told the Mujahideen turned on us and became Al-Qaeda and all that garbage. But no, this was all Jewish subterfuge. And they were just trying to get even with the Soviets. And now they're trying to create greater Israel by having us go in and we're still in Afghanistan, but now they're having us go in and attack Iraq twice. And of course, now they're trying to get us to go in and attack Syria. Now you mentioned briefly about all the Coptic Christians in the Middle East. We never hear about them.
Yep.
I think it's only 2 or 3% of Israel is Christian. In Palestine and Lebanon and Syria, the figure, we always hear about Christian communities, you know, and we think they're like a very small, it's 20%. 20% is, 20% of the Palestinians who are getting shot by Israeli snipers when Trump and his daughter are there.
Are Christians who've been there for centuries, and we have American evangelicals saying nothing about it. And Catholics saying nothing about it, by the way, because there's too many Catholics who are crawling up Israel's ass so much they can't call him out for anything bad. They'll call down America for some of the most minor efforts to police its borders, and yet nothing about the hideous excesses. Really, the state of Israel has been terrible towards Christians since its inception. The Zionist state of Israel has been incredibly nasty to Christians. And I consider it very shameful that there are so many American Christians who are, I'm not even saying that Israel needs to be wiped out. I'm not saying, I think Israel has the right to exist at this point. They're there, but no, I'm sick of, the one thing we'll agree on, and that I love Dr. Jones for having done, it should be okay to criticize all this and speak of it openly. It is time that we all speak of it openly. So, all right. Well, I love it. Everybody be sure to check out our previous interview with Misha on salt and saltpeter, because that's interesting. You know, he offered to let me reprint that article, and I didn't get around to it. I probably should do that. Check out E. Michael Jones's channel. Misha doesn't have his own channel. He just used to be a talk radio guy, and a columnist, and now he comes and be guests on other people's channels. So we're glad to have Misha on. And we'll probably have him on again. I suspect maybe sooner than later. In any case, we've got streams planned for every single night. We're here every night, so please give us a like. Please give us a subscribe. Please check out E. Michael Jones's channel, and as well, and find us on redpillreligion.com, where we could use your financial support. And God bless everybody. God bless you, Misha.
And God bless you too, Max. Have a great evening.